there are two problems associated with being the third person on a panel like this in the middle of the afternoon. The first is that by the time we get to the third speaker, almost everybody in the audience is about ready for a nap. Not because the previous speakers have been boring, but because that's when people fall asleep. And the other is, of course, that by the time you get to the third speaker, in this case me, he winds up repeating much of what the first two speakers have already said. I'll try to avoid both things if I can. I do want to just say one thing, which is that there is another president in the AAU who's a historian and State McCormick at Rutgers. He would not be happy if I didn't. If I didn't suggest that he has not only an identity as a president of an AAU, but he also is a historian. And I should also say that I am a graduate of Rutgers, so the way I feel about the university mixes both the feelings of an alumnus and the current dean of arts and sciences. And I'm going to try to talk actually about my own university a little bit and put it in a larger context. Because I think that while I agree actually with the points that both the first two speakers have made, there's enormous variation from state to state, and enormous variation from university to university. Former president of the University of Michigan famously said that the University of Michigan went from being state-supported to being state-located to being state-harassed. And Rutgers has caught up on all 3 points. I think that this pattern is something to worry about. And the last part of it is sort of counterintuitive. You think that as state support goes down, the amount of harassment would also go down. But it appears that it's inverse and that it actually goes up. Rutgers has not been well prepared for the most recent of these crises in higher education, and I'd emphasize most recent and crises. There have been other crises in public higher education. The most recent one was, of course, precipitated by the recession in 2008. We have not been very well prepared for that, in part because the state subsidy to Rutgers over many, many years has been very significant. And for that reason, Rutgers didn't do some of the things that some of the other universities represented on this panel did do, like fundraising and staying in good touch with alumni, also having winning athletic teams in Division I. We're trying to do all of that now, but all of that's important, and the gradual decline in state subsidy that we would track if we were using visual aids, seemed to me at least, maybe to all of us, that if we actually put the graphs up, it would just be too depressing, so we are all avoiding visual aids. The gradual decline in the state subsidy at Rutgers, which sort of goes like this, suddenly went just off the edge of the table in 2008. And the university, I think everybody associated with the university would candidly say that the time for us to have prepared for this was in the 80s and 90s, and we didn't do it as well as we might. There are some solutions, again, some of the other universities on this panel have put into place, which are easing the crisis, and I don't say that we've got it worse than anybody else. But we have a very low percentage of out-of-state students, for example. Only 8% of our students come from outside the state of New Jersey. I know Berkeley is also very low, but Michigan is high in comparison. Penn State is high in comparison. That's one kind of solution, is to bring in more students from out of state and charge them more tuition. We do charge them more tuition, but for many years the state of New Jersey took away from Rutgers whatever the differential was between the in-state and the out-of-state tuition, so the university had no incentive to admit out-of-state students. That, unfortunately, has recently changed. Maintaining contact with alumni, doing really, really aggressive fundraising. Rutgers is now doing its first billion-dollar campaign, but it's probably 10 or 15 years late. Our endowment is very small compared to other AAUs. And I say this not because I want to talk only about Rutgers, but only to suggest that there's a tremendous variation in what the significance of the crisis is for different universities. I'm not going to speculate here on the reasons, which seem to me complicated. The crisis, in some ways, the so-called crisis, is very easy to articulate, and I think we heard it from both of our first two speakers. And that is the changing ratio between tuition on the one hand and state subsidy on the other. If we hold aside capital costs and deferred maintenance, which I want to come back to in a second, and I look just at my own university, about 65% of Rutgers' income came from the state subsidy in 1994, and about 25% came from tuition, 10% from other sources of income. Those proportions are now exactly reversed. We now get 65% of our income from tuition, and only about 25, less than 25 actually, by the time we get through, from the state subsidy, and increasingly we're trying to find other sources of income. That reversal and the ratio between those two numbers seems to me actually to be extremely important. I held aside capital costs because that also varies enormously from state to state. We have not had a public higher education bond issue for capital in the state of New Jersey since 1988. Now you can imagine what the consequences of that are for Rutgers, which is the public research university in New Jersey. The main implication of this shifting of the ratio between tuition on the one hand and state subsidy on the other is actually a social consequence, and that is that it erodes access for students who cannot consider education either outside the state or in private institutions because of their personal circumstances. And it's not only because they can't afford it, it's also because they are, at least in the case of our students, they have many other kinds of responsibilities. New Jersey is a very small state. We have a significant number of commuters at Rutgers. They have responsibilities in their families, they work. So as we increase tuition, which by the way, the state prevents us from raising tuition as fast as the subsidy is going down, which is another problem. As we increase tuition, unless we can increase scholarship aid at the same rate that tuition is going up, because the scholarship aid in some ways is simply a discount against tuition, unless we can increase scholarship aid at a rate comparable to the rate at which we are increasing tuition, we lose students. They just